It's been a fair bit of time since I last made a proper video, and that's literally because I was getting pretty tired of constantly reading about Destiny news and nothing being positive. Obviously nothing's changed, and Bungie is instead just handing out pieces of bread at this point for their TWABs, because you can't even call it a nothing burger at this point. But at least Marathon is doing well, right? Well, not really. It's beaten my expectation of flopping within the first week, so I'll give them that, but it's not exactly a healthy player base both mentally and numerically. So firstly, the numbers. Marathon had a server slam before its actual release, where the player count peaked at 143,621 on Steam, which is actually a good number of interested people considering Destiny 2 was lucky to hit 10k a day on Steam at this point. Fast forward to today, where Marathon has been out a week, and its peak was back on release day to a tune of 88,337 players on Steam alone. I'd want to be generous in my estimations and say maybe 300,000 people showed up across all consoles for the release day, which again, pretty solid numbers for a new game. But now the player base fluctuates between 65,000 and 20,000 on Steam, which I'm presuming is down to the America's time zones based on where it peaks and dips. If this was an indie studio with significantly lower running costs than what Bungie has to manage, then this might not have been such a bad thing. But because Bungie is such a big studio that was acquired for $3.6 million, which is still an outrageous overvaluation to me, this has to be a failure of catastrophic proportions for Bungie, because whatever financial goal they would have set would have hinged on the actual active player base, because the rest of the people who bought the game and never played it could always change their minds and claim a refund later, which of course would damage Bungie even more financially. Now let's talk mentally, because I've seen some completely ridiculous PR across the board for Marathon to the point where I'm starting to get convinced that Bungie is paying for positive PR so they don't get absolutely curb stomped by Sony. Let's start with the notion of Marathon being any kind of Game of the Year contender. You need to stop taking drugs. This should be a wake-up call if you genuinely think Marathon is Game of the Year material. As for why, let's look at some of the winners in the past 5 years. Resident Evil Village, Psychonauts 2, Metroid Dread, Deathloop, God of War Ragnarok, Elden Ring, Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, Baldur's Gate 3, Alan Wake 2, Metaphor ReFantasia, Helldivers 2, Black Myth Wukong, Balatro, Expedition 33, Blueprints. Where in the hell does Marathon fit into any of this? It's a subpar extraction shooter that nobody asked for and was originally plagiarized from another artist's artwork. You can preach that Bungie was trying something new and it's not a bad thing they tried it, but when everybody is screaming about them neglecting Destiny 2, how do you expect Marathon to fare any better? Then there's things like this hilarious little snippet. Besides the fact it's a clear propaganda account, it states that Marathon has maybe sold nearly 2 million copies in its first week, according to estimates shared by the community. And of these copies, it is estimated that 977,000 were on Steam alone. So I'm going to debunk this nonsense to show why every time I read something like this, I actively think Bungie is bleeding cash for positive PR. Firstly, the site that they view this on is an estimation site that is constantly adjusting as the day goes on, because all of the estimates are tied to an algorithm that tracks the top seller rank, the number of concurrent players, regression analysis, which is kind of mute for a new game, and incorporating any publicly disclosed data of actual units sold, which is non-existent for Marathon. Secondly, this screenshot is actually what I took 5 hours later, and it is substantially different from what they screenshotted. This alone is why you don't throw around estimations as positive PR, because all you're going to do is shoot yourself in the foot. Thirdly, the concurrent player count for Steam is 38k according to the site, which I'm guessing is an average pull from SteamDB. In what universe does it make sense for nearly 2 million copies to have been sold if barely anybody is actually playing it? To reinforce this, Slay the Spire 2, which dropped around the same time, just officially announced that they have sold 3 million copies, which is a game only available on Steam, of which it hit a peak of 574,638 players, and is currently averaging 299,000 players from when I took this screenshot. You can also see in the same screenshot that this is the same site that the Shill account referenced earlier, and it's estimating 4.9 million copies were sold from when I took this screenshot. Despite the fact that we literally just read an official announcement saying that it was 3 million copies sold, which means it's out by a whopping 1.9 million sales, or almost 40%. And that's for a wildly successful game and not the dumpster fire Marathon is in, so if you want my estimation, I would say it would be lucky if Bungie cleared 250k units on Steam and maybe a million across the board in its first week. And then there's the fact that Bungie has humbly, which yes I am saying that sarcastically, they are humbly requesting that reviewers wait until the end of March for their reviews and not the actual release date. Since when have game developers been able to just veto when reviewers can review their games? All that does is allow me to openly say that any reviewer that's actually withholding their review because of this cannot be trusted. Let's throw an extreme example at this logic. Imagine if No Man's Sky turned around on release when they didn't meet expectations and said, "Oh, can all the reviewers please give us 8 years to polish and add to this game before reviewing it?" The reviews would literally read along the lines of it being a magnificent game with hundreds of hours of space exploration that's also co-op. Not that it was a bug-ridden mess sold on lives, with the generator planets being mostly empty and space being even more so. It's just clear manipulation to make the company look good when they need to hear the brutal truth like Hello Games did with No Man's Sky. Game developers, regardless of what financial backing they have or the size that they are, should never have any sway over reviewers, because the whole point of reviewing a game is that it's an independent viewpoint. When it stops being independent, it just becomes propaganda. If your game is not ready on release, you delay it. If you can't delay it for whatever financial reason, you release what you can with a roadmap of what's in the pipeline, and offering an apology with a reason is always better than radio silence. Why is this so difficult for AAA studios to understand nowadays? So the only conclusion I can draw from all this is that Bungie is doomed, because nobody would try so damn hard to manipulate PR with a dwindling player base if they were doing so well. You would literally just say thank you for the support and carry on working on the game as you planned, and maybe even tease future content if you feel like it. A perfect example is literally Expedition 33 last year. The game released to critical acclaim and widespread praise because it was fantastically built. The devs basically just said thank you for the support and then quietly dropped some extra content at the end of the year, because why not? If Bungie was in a similar boat, why wouldn't they just do the same, or at least boast a bit about Marathon's success by publishing some sales figures? But that's all I'm going to say about it though. If you're enjoying Marathon, good for you. Enjoy it while it lasts, but if you think it's going to be Game of the Year, seek help. You clearly need it.